Hey, I'm Paolo from Trivium. You're watching me on ForBassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Coming to you today from the Warwick booth at the 2017 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California, with our good friend Paolo Gregoletto. Hey, Paolo.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very well. Very well.
You've got a very cool gig. I want to hear all about Trivium and all the things that you're doing, but let's back up a little bit and talk about what all led up to that. I know you're from Florida originally.
Yep.
You grew up there, and tell us about how you were exposed to music and what attracted you to the bass and how you came down here on the dark side with the rest of us bottom feeders.
Well, what kind of started me on wanting to play music was, it was called the Italian Festival. It was my middle school's fair, and a couple of my friends and I wanted to play at it. We were listening to a lot of music, a lot of pop punk, a lot of stuff like Blink-182, Offspring, and so we wanted to play some stuff like that. And we all kind of just picked our instruments at the lunch table, and I picked bass. And I learned a Blink-182 song, a Metallica song, and an Offspring song. And
Back up.
Yeah.
Why? Not too many people pick bass unless you hear the kid in fourth grade who sees the stand-up bass in the corner.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
what was it about the bass?
When I look back, like what I was listening to, I mean, a lot of Sublime, a lot of 311, and I think if you could pick out those bands, the bass playing will stand out. It was very melodically driven by the bass lines, and so I think my ear was just more attuned to that stuff when I was listening to it, and so I picked it up, got a bass. It was like a Yamaha, like a 4-string. I still have it. I just learned those songs, and playing live was what really hooked me on wanting to do it, and I never looked back from that day, and I've been playing bass ever since.
How did the Trivium gig come about?
We had actually met each other playing a couple shows in Florida. I was in another local band and played a show when Trivium was still a 3-piece, and then played a show with them in Tampa, like right before I joined, like a couple months. We were just similar age, similar mindset, and at the end of high school, when I graduated, I decided I needed another project, and I needed to get with guys that were more in the same headspace as I was, and those dudes were doing it. They had just been signed to Roadrunner, and we met up. I filled in with the tour. It was Machine Head Chimera, and I had never done a U.S. tour before, and it was like, it really linked up, and we meshed well, and it was perfect, and I've been in the band since then, 2004.
Talk to me a little bit about your technique.
Technique, I started with playing with my fingers, which I guess would be kind of like the traditional way to start playing bass, and I was lucky. I just was really into trying to learn so many different styles and different techniques, and I worked with bass instructors that were all styles of music. One of the dudes I trained with was played with the Commodores for a little bit, and so it just like...
Who was that?
A guy named Doug Dotweiler. He was actually a guitar player, but he played bass as well. Amazing bass player too, and just kind of taught me to like think about bass differently. I think if I would have just stuck with like learning how to just do rock, I wouldn't approach bass the same way, and writing as well, I wouldn't approach it the same way. I think you start to learn that all the styles of music are really interconnected. A chord progression can be played so many different ways. And then when you start to think of it like that, with bass playing even, you can just take 3-4 chords and you can alter it so much rhythmically. And I try to apply that stuff when I think about music and I think about writing now, is that maybe the way this feels right now isn't why it's working. Maybe it needs to feel different rhythmically, or maybe the notes need to be a little different. And that's for me like how I approach writing and playing completely, and that really helped open my mind, instead of like, well, it's got to be like this is how a rock guy plays it.
So once you discovered the instrument and started looking at it in those ways, who were some of your bass influences or bass heroes even?
I mean, once I got into metal, it was like Cliff Burton and Steve Harris were like the guys. Dave Ellefson, but then I started to kind of like branch out. Obviously, Jaco Pastorius is from pretty much where I live. I live not too far from Oakland Park, which is where he's from, and there's a park there. And now it's just like branching out and just discovering different people. And with Spotify, I'm always on the look for like new bands, new bass players. But I mean, in the beginning, it was like Steve Harris, Cliff Burton, gods. That stuff was like the guys that altered the sound of bass playing in metal. Billy Sheehan, I mean, probably one of my favorites. Like when I saw him at the bass camp last year and he got up on stage, I have seen him play in other bands, but there's something just about his playing and his presence that is like electric. And even in that room, like just amongst other bass players, you could feel like, wow, like this guy's going to do something unbelievable. And his playing, his harmonics, the stuff he does is like unlike anything. It's like watching, Eddie Van Halen on guitar. You're just like dumbfounded by how amazing it is.
Yeah, Billy is great. I've had the privilege of interviewing him a few times.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned we're in the Warwick booth here at NAMM. Let's talk a little bit about your equipment. What are you playing?
I've been playing a 5-string Corvette double buck. They had sent me out a couple to try, and that was the one that really felt right for me. The versatility and the pickups, I use their MEC double bucks. I've never had the luxury of being able to switch from like single coil to like humbucker and being able to mix it up. And what you can do with the sound is pretty mind-blowing. And I mean, it was pretty easy to dial in right away, but when I'm at home, I like to experiment with the different settings on it. And I mean, if you had one of those basses, you could play and sound like so many different things. And I mean, you can't beat that.
And it works well with the band, regardless of what particular song.
Right out of the box, like you could like throw it into any situation. I feel like they would sound perfect. I mean, now that I've been playing Warwick for about a year and a half, and I've really got to live with the sound, I can pick it out on a record a lot easier. When I hear a guy, I'm like, oh, that's definitely a Warwick. I mean, the mid sound and just anyone that plays it, and when I say that, they're like, yeah, definitely. You can just tell their sound right away, and there's not. There's only a couple basses I feel like where you could really, if you've been playing them, you can tell what they're going to be like, and they're one of the brands for sure.
What about the future? What else would you like to do, or what's keeping you busy now, first of all, and how will that translate into the future?
Well, we're kind of at the tail end of the album cycle for Silence in the Snow. Pretty much after that, it's we're on a pretty set schedule of tour for a year and a half, 2 years, make an album. So we'll eventually get in the studio again, and this will be my first record with a Warwick, so I'm excited to hear that. I'm pretty sure, for me, it's really just, you're always after this like almost unattainable perfect tone for a record, and I do feel like with this, whatever we do next with the Warwick bass I have now, I feel like I'm going to get pretty close to what I hear in my head. So that's what the future holds.
All right. Last question. What would you be if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music.
Well, if I could like go back now with everything I know, I mean, with playing music and writing songs, a lot of it's storytelling and trying to communicate something through the music. So, if I could pick something that's kind of similar, it would be something involved with writing, whether that's writing a book or writing, kind of a journalistic type thing. I feel like being able to tell narratives and tell stories is very powerful, and thankfully I can do that with music, but that would be the closest thing, and I think I'd probably be able to pick that up if I had to do that right away.
Nothing like expressing yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, please be sure to let us know about the tour dates and the record and everything else, and we will impart that to our audience here and let everybody know.
Yeah.
You're going to be in Europe or the U.S.?
We'll be in the Europe for about 2 months, and then we'll be back in Europe at the end of the summer. So if you're over there, you'll be seeing us quite a bit this year, and I'm sure we'll be back in the States at some point.
All right. Trivium. Watch for the tour dates. Check them out. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sitting down with us for a few minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Much luck. Continued success to you always.
Thank you.
From the Warwick booth at the 2017 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California, with our good friend Paolo Gregoletto of Trivium. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.